All right, everyone, welcome back to another session of our Power BI workshop. I've started the recording because that is something I keep forgetting every time. And again, thank you for joining in on time. It's I really appreciate that we don't have to wait after the start of the class official time. So I really appreciate you guys joining in on time. And just before we begin, can you guys confirm if two things? One, you can hear me fine, and two, the screen is visible. You should be seeing the title slide right now.
Yeah,
Both are fine.
Great,
all
Yes.
good.
perfect. Super. All right. So before we, start off with what we have in plan for today, what we have in store for today, do you guys have any questions from last week? Anything, any doubts, anything you want me to go over again before we learn new things this time? Any questions, any doubts? Let me know, guys, and then we'll start off with what we have in plan for today. All righty. Let me just figure this out. Okay. So in case maybe you can remember something, you remember something later when we're looking at something else, just you can either call out or you can put it in the chat window. I'll pick up your question there and then itself. So there was obviously two things left from last week, but I'll just talk about that in a second. So this is what we have in plan for today. We'll continue our visualization journey. We'll look at a few other visuals that were left over from last week. And I also wanted to show you guys a couple of extra things we can do with charts that we haven't touched yet. So we'll do that today. I don't want to give away the surprise. So I have not purposely put that in this slide. We obviously looked at most of the slicers last week, but a couple of things are remaining which we'll look at today as well. We'll talk about filters, understand the difference between slicers and filters, if there is any, in Power BI. And we'll spend some time on data modeling as well, where we'll talk about what is a star schema, what is a snowflake schema, why are they named the way they are, and what happens if you know don't care about any of these terms. What will happen if we suddenly decide that okay, data modeling is not something we want to learn, so we'll proceed with our reporting anyways. What happens when people have that kind of attitude towards this kind of project, let's say. So we look at those challenges, obstacles, etc., and a lot of common mistakes that people make. I have made myself. So we'll see how to avoid those mistakes when we get to the data modeling part. And apart from that, a few other things that like last week, that I have learned and picked up from the industry that are honestly not worth writing in the agenda itself, but that have helped me out in terms of saving time, in terms of efficiency, in terms of storytelling. How do I make something pop out that is maybe not so let's say legible initially when we are creating something from scratch? So how do we keep those things in mind? We'll go through that as well. So what we will do here is I will just switch to our where we left off last week. What I've done is after the class I just put in these extra card visuals as well, added a few more filters to populate the report and to make it bigger. There's nothing new that I did. It's just a control C, control V, and I added a few more dimensions and measures after that point. What I wanted to do was, before we look at a few other visuals, I wanted to wrap up the slicers part. So we looked at these categorical variables like segment, ship mode, region, this and that. And we looked at, you can either show it in a list format like this or in a drop down format like this, depending on obviously how many categories there are, how many names there are, etc., and how much space do you actually end up wanting to save at the end of the day. So those are two ways to do it. But what happens if, so what I'll do is I'll just delete one of these. What happens if I have something other than categories to put in filters? For example, let's say I want to look at a date slicer. Right, so I want to look at, or my audience wants to look at a certain range. For example, Jan 2020 to January, or to let's say March 2020. Right, that quarter period. That's all I want to look at, nothing else. So can I? How do I do that? How do I get that in? So the process is similar, even though the slicer will appear a little differently. So we'll go here to the slicer icon, which is the first icon in the fifth row in our visualizations pane. We'll select the slicer and I'll just put it here. And next, what we'll do is, since we're looking at date slicers, we'll go to our orders table. And we have two date columns. We have order date and we have ship date. We'll primarily be working with the order date, as in when was the order placed. So I'll just select the order date, or you can drag and drop it here. And I'll just expand this. So you can see here that by default, it takes the first date in our data set, which was 3rd January 2018, and the last date, which is 30th December 2021. So this is all fine, it's great. But now that I know I'm looking at Jan 2020 to March 2020, right? That's the only range I care about in this report. So there are two ways to do it. One, I can, drag this slider to find 2020, where is January, etc. So that is definitely one way to do it. The other way is you can simply type that in. So if I click on, let's say the first date I want is 1st January 2020. So I click here and a very helpful calendar comes up, just like we have in Windows. And I can go up or down depending on where I want to go. By the way, if I keep going up, you'll notice all of these are grayed out because we simply don't have data for that. So you cannot select any of these dates before Jan 2018. We want January 2020. So we will just go down to 2020. We'll click on January. We'll click on first. You know how to do this. And I want March 2020 as well. So we will go down to 2020 March and we'll say 31st March. And as soon as we do that, obviously, like we did with all the slicers last week, everything here changes since I haven't gone into edit interactions and disconnected the slicer from anything. So all the visuals will change based on the date range that I'm selecting. If, however, you find this calendar selecting very tedious, you can always type something in here as well. So here, let's say I want to look at 2022. I can just type that in and it will update based on that. So there are three options you can do. You can either play around with the slider, you can either type it in, or you can select it from the calendar. All of those options are there in the default slicer view when it comes to dates. Right now, here's the interesting part. This is all great. This is straightforward. Next to this clear filter icon or clear selection icon, we have the drop down option, which we've looked at as a list and drop down before. But in the date slicer, you get a lot more options in terms of customizing the slicer. So let's look at a couple of them. Let me click on this. So here you'll notice that by default, we'll always be in the between selection, as in select between a certain date, select a certain range. You can also select before, so that will freeze up the initial date. You can only select the last date. So before this date, show me everything. That's what it's saying. You can also do the same thing the other way after. So that freezes the last date. So show me everything after this particular date that I select, while the last date will always remain whatever is the last date in your data set. So you can freeze that in place if you don't want the end user, the client, to change either the last or the first date. You can always freeze that into place by selecting one of these. List is, you know what list is at this point. Every single date in my order date column is listed here if that is something that you feel is relevant. Drop down, you guys know at this point. Where it becomes interesting is this relative date. Now, relative time, obviously, we don't have any time component in our data set, so that is kind of pointless here. But if I go to relative date, you'll get an idea of how relative time will works as well. So if I go to relative date, so relative, when it says relative, it means relative to your machine's date, not to your data set's date, relative to your system's date. So if you are, for example, sitting in Australia, right, then
Yeah.
it'll be what, 9:30 or something in the evening right now. So
Yeah.
this, in a couple of hours, it'll be 10th October. So in India it'll be 9th, in Australia it'll be 10th. So in that case, relative, when I say last one day, for me in India it'll show me 9th or 8th. In Australia it'll show you 9th, where it shows me 8th. So that is what relative means. It does not care about the date in your data set. It only cares about what is the date and time on your local systems. That is what this relative means here when I say relative date. And in this, you have plenty of customizable options. So here, by default, it'll say last one, and you can select anything here. So last one day, week, weeks, months, etc. So let's say I select months, right? Obviously, this will be blank because it's 2022 right now, and we only have data till 30th December 2021. So let's say I select last 12 months, and you have data coming in. I'll tell you here at the bottom that range that you have selected. So it goes from 10th October 2021 to 9th October 2022. That's last 12 months, and this is the data we have for that particular time period. You can also say last not 12 years, but I only want to look at last 2 years worth of data. So here I can select years and it'll show me only last 2 years worth of data with the date showing up in this case. Similarly, I can also look at next and this. So if I say next 2 years, since I don't have any forecasts right now, I don't have anything of the sort. Obviously, everything will be blank here. If I say next 2 days, obviously all of this will be blank because I don't have any future looking data in my data set. No forecasts are available. So all of this will appear to be blank. And this basically does this week, this year, this month, all of this will be blank because there's no data for 2022 here. But when you are looking at real time data or at least the same year data, you can use things like this. Just show me this month's, let's say, items sold, how many subscribers did we get, how much sales did we make, etc., etc. You can select this and then whatever unit you want from this drop down list. So this is all what you can do. I'll just clear the selection. And all of these, so what you guys can do is you can try out these different things when you're practicing later, but at the end of the day you get a lot of customizable options when it comes to dates as compared to when it comes to categories or the other things. Right. So, any questions on the date slicer, guys, or any slicer? To be honest, anything that you want me to ask,
Well,
want me to repeat? Yeah, Muru.
if I wanted to put month only, month selections.
In this drop down, sorry, in this date slicer,
Yeah, in the date slicer, instead of date, if I want to have only month.
then you will probably have to go to the hierarchy and just put month here. This is probably how you can do it.
Okay.
If you
And
also wanted year here, then this is how you can keep doing this. So
okay,
just go into hierarchy, select
or
whatever you're looking for. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, got it, got it, got it, got it. And I can make it as a button as well
So this
instead of
appears as
like
a button. Yeah. So this will be a button. But when
no
you say button, do you
instead of
mean single choice?
yeah singles.
It's a good question. Let me see. It should be a, yeah, you can. So you can select single select. So, but then it'll select the entire thing. So you can't select only one
And
month out of it.
and uh, no, not single. Okay. And so like you know how the slicer like I just wanted to select only um where it like a cube sort of.
In you're talking about these icons.
Yeah, these icons instead of like
Uh-huh.
January, it will come as January as an icon, not
Oh, was this you were was this what you were asking last week?
exactly, exactly.
You want January as an icon? I don't think that is possible. It's worth checking out. I'll just take a note of this. My sense is that it's. I don't think it's possible at all. But if there's an answer, I'll let you know next week. I finally
Sure.
understood your question. I'll check it out.
Yeah, hi.
All right. It's a interesting question. Diksha, you had a question?
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
actually, one condition is there in the visualization. If I want to change the visualization according to the person, his date is yeah is fine. But if I want
Uh-huh.
to changes all the data, something parallelly, I want also date slicer, but
Uh-huh.
same of this I want some particular person visualization. Suppose one organization have 3 to
Hmm.
4 p.m project
Okay.
manager,
Uh-huh.
and what kind of project they handling and how many projects has done, how many are pending. At these kind of situation I want the visualization according to one person. So it is
Hmm.
possible, and if it is, so how we
So
can
there are two things to your question. One is obviously like we saw with customers. So for example, let's say instead of customer, this is project manager, right? So if I select Adam Hart as a project manager, I can see how Adam Hart has done in subcategories over time in region. So all of these numbers and graphs you're seeing are only for this project manager called Adam Hart. So Adam Hart has sold this much in the East region, etc., etc. So that is one way to do it. The other part to your question is when, let's say, like you said, we have, let's say, four project managers.
hmm,
Now, Adam Hart logs in, and
hmm,
we only want to show Adam Hart his or her charts. We don't want Adam R to see what Pranav has done, what Diksha has done. So that is something called static row level security, which we'll look at probably in the last session. So those are two things that I want to point out. One is this, and the other is that we only want to show them their own visuals, nothing else. So that is a completely different conversation altogether. So out of these two, which one are you looking for? Is this the one you're looking for, that I only want to see Aaron Bergman, how Aaron Bergman is done? Or is it something else you're looking for?
No, no, no. Same thing I was looking.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's fine. But sometime we need to make a visualization like 4 to 5 conditions, some kind, like date-wise condition, person-wise conditions.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah, suppose my project manager Sachin, suppose,
Hmm.
and Sachin have the multiple customers,
Right,
right? And there is some team leads in
right.
hierarchy of the Sachin. Sachin
Hmm.
wants to pick someone, and then visualization filter account according to the team lead name.
Okay.
There is a 2 or 3 conditions I need to apply in the visualization, so that's the thing I want to know.
So I mean,
Is kind of cascading condition.
okay. Now that word helps me understand what you're looking for. So that
Mm.
is possible. It's not easy, but it is possible. What we can do is next week when we look at DAX, right? Next in the week after that. So you can't do it cascading conditions. You can't do right away in Power BI. You will need to create a formula, or actually multiple formulas to do it. So we can try and look at that next week, or most likely in the session that is 2 weeks from now. We will
Mm.
try and look at this cascading condition there. So right now it's not possible in the simple visuals that we have, but it is possible. It's just a longer way to get there. Just keep this in mind. In case I don't cover it in the last session, just point that out. I will do it in that class.
One more
Yeah.
question,
Yeah,
Pranav.
Manu.
Um, Say, for example, now we have the data for the orders. Okay, you have
Mm-hmm.
one data sets.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, say, for example, I mean, this particular one is, say, for Nike orders. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I wanted to have another file which says Adidas or any other company or 2, 3
Mm-hmm.
companies. Okay, so you have
Okay.
same sort of data sets, but
Sure.
relating to different companies. Now,
Sure.
can we have that sort of a thing and have a filter with the as a company as a filters?
So you're saying, let's say Nike, Adidas, Reebok, there are three different data sets we have, right? Let's say they're in Excel, and you're asking if we can add a company filter and do it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
see, there we either, if you want to apply that filter, then you will have to, between the three sheets or tables or data sets we have, if you want to put them in a filter, then we'll have to find a way to connect them at some point. We'll have to either find a common column between the two that we can connect them, or something of the sort. If we can't find a connection, then it is not possible to put that company filter in a slicer or a filter and then try and look at that data. So we'll have to find a way to connect them using data modeling, which we'll look at later. If there is
Okay,
no connection between them, then it's not possible.
okay. So say, okay, all right, got it.
All right. So just keep that question when we look at data modeling later. Maybe you might get a few ideas, or
Sure.
you can probably expand on the example. We'll see that when we get there. All right. But it's a good question. Anybody else? Anything you want to ask me before we look at a few other visuals?
Yes,
Yeah, Diksha.
one thing is how works is refresh part. Suppose I don't know if this is my question is related to this same scenario or not, but I
Mm-hmm.
want to know, like we need to refresh my visualization according some conditions, like within a week or maybe month or maybe
Sure.
6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So how we can do is
So
this?
refresh we'll cover on the last session. We have 15 minutes meant for incremental refresh, Power
Yes,
BI
yes.
service and all that. So we will cover that. Don't worry.
Okay, okay.
All right.
Thank
Okay.
Yeah,
you.
I had
So
one
yeah.
doubt. Last time I had
Yeah,
asked,
Shagin.
like, how we can compare in, say, this time series, right? Like, how we can compare between two times.
So Shagina, let me come to your question in just a little bit. I
Okay.
have that answer for you. Just give me some time. I just want to cover the visuals part, then I'll come back to your question.
Yeah.
Does that
Okay.
work?
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right, great. Okay, so I'll just open up a new page and give me a second. Okay, so here I had a few other visuals that we wanted to cover, like scatter plot, map visual, tree map, and maybe one or two others. And the reason I wanted to do, especially the scatter plot, is more from a, to be honest, a personal view, because scatter plots have become very common in the last few years, with a lot of people learning a lot about data and this and that. And scatter plots are not just, comparing the x, what is on the x and y axis. We can add something like a quadrant to a scatter plot, which can further enhance the interpretability and the message that we want people to take away when they are looking at a scatter plot. So let me actually show you that in a practical sense rather than walk you through the theory. So what we will do is, these visuals that we look at, we will instead of creating a dashboard that we did previously, I'll just look at these individually rather than place them left and right and all that. So we'll start off with a scatter plot, which is the third icon in the third row that you can see here. So let's go to a scatter plot. Let
Before,
me just,
sorry,
yeah,
Pranav,
Muru.
sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Before we continue, say for example, now you created a new page. Okay,
Huh,
now
uh-huh.
we already have a date filter over there. So
Right.
when you change the date, is it going to change the selection criteria in page one?
Or it'll, this slicer, all these slicers only apply to your whichever page you've placed them on. So
All right.
regardless of
Okay.
how many pages you have, this will not be affected. If
Okay.
you
Okay. That's
want this to be affected, there are ways to do it. So when I show you filters, I'll just walk you through that. But right now,
okay.
nothing will change except on this slide.
All right. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right.
Thank you.
Sorry, I too had one doubt.
Yeah.
Can we increase the size of a page here?
Yeah. So here at the bottom, you have this zoom icon. So you can just make it as big as you want.
Okay. Yeah.
This was not there in the, I think, I forgot which version of Power BI this is. If I go to about, I might get something. I don't know what version. So till at least I think 8 months back, this zoom button was not there for reasons Microsoft knows best. But they've added this in the last 6 months, so this is very easy to do now. But if you have an older version of Power BI, this button will not be there.
Oh,
All
okay.
right. So okay. So scatter plot. When I select the scatter plot, you'll notice a bunch of options are here in the field section. But not to be overwhelmed by it, a scatter plot, what is it used for, right? It's used for comparing two values, two different measures. In our case, we'll just put sales and profit on the X and Y axis. So I'll just select sales and we'll select profit. And by default, we'll only get one data point. So what happens here is, Power BI and any other BI tool first aggregates them. So it does a sum of sales, it does a sum of profit, and it just shows them as one data point, which is okay, I guess. But if you want to look at all the different data points that we have, so here if I go to the tabular view, we have all these different data points, right? Sales, each of these points, profit, each of these data points. There are 9,994 rows in our data set. So that is the number of data points that we can get in this particular visual. But right now, obviously, that is not visible. So if you ever want to, instead of looking at just one data point, you want to show all the different or all the rows or all the values that you have in your data set, it's very straightforward. Instead of letting Power BI look at the sum of sales, whatever in the x-axis, whatever is on the y-axis, just go here to your fields. You'll notice sales is on the x, profit is on the y-axis. Go to sales, where it says sum of sales. There's a very small drop down there. Click on that. Click on that, and here you have all the different aggregation options. So by default, it takes sum if you want average, minimum, maximum, etc. All of those different options are there. In our case, we don't care about any of them. We want all the values here. So we'll just say don't summarize. And what this does is, it shows you all the 10,000 whatever data points there are. All of them are now plotted in this scatter plot when it comes to sales. Similarly, we can do the same thing for profit. So I'll go to sum of profit, and here we'll just say don't summarize please. And here what it does is, now if I go to any data point, this one for example, show me this data point or this transaction or this order had a sales of $14,000 and a profit of let's say almost $7,000. This one had a sales of whatever, profit or loss of this much. So why is this useful from a business perspective? is now we can see most of the orders that were placed or most of the transactions that happened, most of them are below this $5,000 sales mark, right? All of them are gathered here somewhere around the profit loss axis. Above zero is obviously profit, below zero is obviously loss. So most of them are congregated around here, and then there are a few orders above 5,000, even fewer above 10,000, only two above 15,000. So that is what a scatter plot helps us do. But this is a very basic version of a scatter plot. What most people in the BI industry, in the analytics industry will do is they'll take this a little further from a storytelling perspective. We can add a lot more so that when we are presenting this to anybody, when we are presenting this to a client, stakeholder, audience, they can, instead of having to wonder, okay, this is 5,000, 10,000, you can take away that kind of guesswork and just give them the answer straight away by creating, let's say, a quadrant of sorts. So high sales, high profit; high sales, loss or low profit; low sales, low profit; and low sales but high profit. So we can look at some margins and all that and create a kind of strategy based on that. So here what we'll do is, keeping the scatter plot selected, instead of format your visual, this time we will go to the third icon which says add further analysis to your visual, or what used to be called as the analytics section. So we'll go to this analytics section, and here you can notice that we have four options. And by the way, this analytics option is only there for a scatter plot and a line plot or line chart. You won't find it there for example, a bar chart, or even if you do, the options will be very, very minimal. So here we go to the analytics section and you have four options: trend line, x-axis, y-axis, constant line, symmetry, shading. So in our case, you want to create a kind of quadrant where we'll say that any sales above $10,000 are considered good, and obviously any profit that's basically above this $0 line here is considered profit and is considered obviously good for us. So what we'll do is we'll get a line on the x-axis, a line on the y-axis based on this threshold value that we have right now decided out of the blue. Obviously a company will have their own threshold value, but we'll decide one right now. So we'll go to x-axis constant line, we'll click on this add line button, and notice here, as soon as I clicked on add line, one x-axis constant line came in, and here you can see a dotted line on the x-axis at the $0 mark. Obviously, we wanted at the $10,000 mark, so we'll go to this line section. We'll expand this, and you can type in your own arbitrary value here. So we'll say 10,000, and the line comes up at the $10,000 mark. And you can change the color if you want. If you want to make it stand out from the data points, you can always change the color to black. Change the style from dash to solid to dotted, whatever you prefer. I usually go with solid, but that's obviously up to you. And if you want it in front or behind the data point, so if it's overlapping on any of the data points and we select behind, you'll notice it just goes in behind that data point. So it's not, taking up space or overlapping on any of the data points that you prefer. So you can always do that. I'll just say in front, but play around with the other option as well. And here data label, if I just turn this on, it'll just tell you that instead of having to look at the x-axis for the exact value, it'll tell you the exact value of the threshold here at the top if you prefer. You can change it to the right as well. If you want, you can change it and put it under, so it'll go at the bottom. So all of those options are there. You can change the style, etc., all of those things. I just turn this off. Just play around with the data labels if you want. So that is essentially how you can add it. Another thing I want to point out from a purely a hygiene point of view is, right now you'll notice this, it takes a very simple x-axis constant line 1. If ever you're adding multiple constant lines, like at a 10,000, 12,000, 15,000, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines you're adding in the x-axis, then maybe you might want to rename this properly instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because if somebody else is looking this, they may not know what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is. So you can put in your own thing like 10K threshold or something like that, which makes it easy to distinguish between the different lines. So that's the x-axis. Y-axis is exactly the same. So we'll say add line, and here we will just put in 0 is fine because that is the profit loss dividing line. So we'll keep it to 0. We'll change the color to black. We'll make it solid. And notice right now that when it says in front, it's coming above these data points. If I say behind, the line will disappear for most of the start of that line. So that is what this position basically does. And that's it. That's all there is. Now what you can do is, like I think Muru, you had asked me last week, the if you want to insert text boxes here, right? This is where they become very helpful. So if I want to insert a text box here that says anything, for example, it says high sales, high profit, for lack of a better phrase. You can put those things here, you make them bold, so that when somebody else is looking at this, when you're presenting this, it becomes fairly obvious that what this particular quadrant refers to is a high sales, high profit quadrant. And when somebody is looking at this, okay, so these transactions are clearly doing extremely well for me. And maybe you might want to dive deeper into the data to understand whether these were outliers, whether these were transactions we can repeat, is there any strategy we can do, who are the customers, etc. So you can look at all those things. This is where the sales were high, but there was a loss. And there was only one transaction like that, so it might not be worth spending too much time on that. These are low sales, low profit, or losses, and these are low sales but high profit. So maybe you might want to look into where there's a good margin, we're getting a lot of profit there. So what are some of the categories, who are my customers who are giving me a lot of profit while not doing a lot of sales, etc. So all of these are obviously strategic decisions that we can make, but it just becomes a lot easier when we create this kind of threshold line, quadrant, and all of that, and try and get that into play. Similarly, just like these quadrants, if I go back to my line chart, so what I'll do is I'll just copy this line chart and I'll put it on a new page. And just like in a scatter plot, we can do a lot with a line chart as well. So if I go here, you'll notice we have a lot more options here as compared to a scatter plot when it comes to the analytics section. So instead of just a constant line and a x and y axis constant line, I have minimum line, maximum line, average, median, percentile, etc. All those different things are there. So if I go to minimum line, you can add it in, it will come to the minimum, etc. The reason I want to show you minimum and maximum line is because while right now you'll think, yeah, okay, minimum line is here, maximum is here, why should I care about, or why should I add that in? The advantage of this is when you apply slicers or when you apply filters to a visual or to a report, this min and max line, which will be at the top, will change according to the filter. So it's not going to stick here to the bottom. If you apply a slicer which elevates these lines to a little bit of higher value, this minimum line will elevate along with that as well. So that is the advantage, potential advantage of a minimum and a maximum line that you can add in. Similarly, what I would want you guys to do is, when you're practicing, just put in constant x and y axis, constant lines if you prefer. And in a line chart, especially the one that we are seeing right now, sales over time, the advantage of doing this is, when especially useful in one of the projects that I did was we introduced a new site design previously. I think it was in 2020, where we were seeing a bit of a decline in the time our visitors were spending on the website. So we developed a new design, we made it live, and we wanted to see how, let's say, 3 months before the design and 3 months after the design, what was the trend of customers, how much time were they spending on the website or that particular page, especially after they looked at the new design. Was there any engagement, did the time increase, etc. So when we wanted to present that kind of analysis to our CEO, the easiest way to do this was obviously a line chart which showed them before and after a certain date. But the easiest thing was just add a constant line on a line chart. And when I say add line, you can see here, if I go to the line, it automatically takes a calendar view. So I can put in like any date here. Let me just put it as I'll just put a random date. So this line comes in that before this design, this is how our traffic was. After this design, this is how my traffic was. So it's very, very useful in that sense. What a threshold line and a minimum line, maximum line, all of these different things can do. And finally, there's also something called a forecast. Now, I will never recommend anybody using a Power BI forecast for anything, but what it is useful for is a very simple ballpark figure of what potentially our sales numbers or our subscriber numbers, any of these things can look at, can look like in the next, let's say, 3 months, 6 months, something like that. It is not extremely reliable by any stretch of the imagination. I would not, you know, tell you to base your entire company strategy or campaign strategy just based on what Power BI tells you. But as far as a ballpark figure is concerned, it is relatively reliable in that sense. So it is only available for a line chart. No other chart is this forecast available for. So if I turn this on, you'll notice by default, if I just expand this, it takes whatever value you're seeing here. So right now we're at the month view. So it tells you the next 10 months. If I go to the, if I just go up, if I go to the quarter view, it will tell me the next 10 quarters. If I go to the year view, it will take, I mean, this is extremely pointless, but it gives me the next 10 years. So this is what the forecast by default gives us. But if you want to change that, let's say I only want to look at how much sales will I do as a company, or how much sales can I expect or forecast in the next 3 months. What you can do is in the units where it says points, you can select months, forecast length, you can select 3, and just click on apply. So it'll just tell you in the next 3 months, you can expect in January, you can expect $41,000 sales. In February, 40,000. In March, you might see an increase of 68,000. How does it calculate this forecast? It Power BI, just like Tableau, uses a technique called exponential smoothing to make these forecasts, to calculate these forecasts, and tell you what, based on the historical data that you have, it looks at the patterns and all of those different things to understand what could potentially be the forecast for the next month or the next 3 quarters, if you want to look at that. And the longer you make this line, basically the longer you make the forecast, the less accurate it becomes. That's just a rule in general, regardless of which algorithm is being used. But the longer you make, for example, a lot of people make a mistake. I want to look at the forecast for the next 2 years, right? That is always going to backfire, because no, let's say, algorithm is good, at least these days, that will predict to a very accurate degree what things might look at 2 years from now. So the smaller that number, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, the more accurate that forecast becomes. Having said all of that, I want to reiterate that there are time series forecasting is an entire field by itself. It's very complex, and that's why people who do time series forecasting are paid equally well for doing their work. And there are much more complex algorithms and more accurate algorithms than exponential smoothing. But if you still want to check this out and see what and how it works, you can always go to forecast and do, play around with these different options here.
Yeah,
All
true.
right,
I mean,
so
like
yeah,
otherwise,
yeah, Manu.
otherwise the actuarials will not have any job.
Exactly. It'll be a disaster in the making if we rely on this for, let's say, actually, it's a good point, Muru, because a few people still, when things get a little desperate in certain situations, you want to understand, you want to show that, okay, we want this much raw material supply in the next 6 months based on what we've done. And this is what, not Power BI, but this is what the algorithm is telling me. And based on that, you source your materials. Turns out either it falls short of the expectations of the demand, or it exceeds it and the raw material is going to waste. So it is a very precarious thing, forecasting, to be honest. So we leave that to all the time series modeling folks, and we just use this, when you get new data and you want to get a sense of what could potentially be in store in the next 2-3 months. It is okay to just brainstorm and get a ballpark figure, but beyond that, to be honest, nobody ever uses this to make any big crucial decisions where money is concerned. All right, so guys, any questions on the analytics pane or forecasting or anything of the sort that we've covered here? All right, so just play around with this. What I will do from my side is, I'll when I send you guys this Power BI workbook, I'll try and find the forecasting explanation on the Microsoft official site. I think it's there. They've laid out how they calculated all of that very well. So I will share that if any of you are interested, but just keep in mind you will definitely need at least a little basic understanding of mathematics, high school mathematics, to understand what is going on under the hood. Previously, Power BI used to let us look at the equation here like Tableau does, but for I think some reason they've kind of removed that in the latest update, so I can't really find a way to do it, but that's okay. I will send you the link if anybody of you wants to deep dive into the into how it's done. Let me in the meantime just rename all of this. Scatter, let me call this line. All right. So couple of more things when it comes to visuals is you can see all these different visuals here that we've worked with. You can, we've looked at a few of the most popular ones. What I would want you guys to do is, before we meet up next week, try out a few others. Try out let's say an area chart, try out a dual axis, a clustered chart, ribbon chart, etc. Somebody had a question.
No, no, not question. It's a. I think we talked about KPI.
KPI,
It's
right? So
what?
I'll just show you that in a second. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So you guys try out these, what the ones you're not doing here, so that there's a very good chance you might run into some issues or errors, or you'll definitely have questions when you do it. So before we start off next week, for sure, try that out and come with your questions. I'll see if it's possible. I will definitely help you out with wherever you got stuck or whatever questions you have. So coming to
One more
Diksha's
quick
question,
thing.
yeah, Muru.
Sorry. Yeah, after that.
All right. So coming to Diksha's point about the KPI visual. Now, before I do that, obviously here in the sales overview, we looked at the card visual, right? The most basic version of it. There is next to that, we have two more visuals. There is a multi-row card and there is a KPI visual. So what this multi-row card, I'm not a fan of it, but what this multi-row card does is instead of like we saw here, we saw total sales, profit, and quantity as three different card visuals, and that's how we usually see it in the industry as well. But what this multi-row card does is instead of three different visuals, it takes all your metrics, all your KPIs, and puts that into one view itself. So what does that mean? Let's just select sales, profit, and quantity here. So this is what a multi-row card looks like. Instead of three different cards, if you have a lot of KPIs you want to show in a single view, maybe instead of using this amount of space, this is a lot of space for a report. If you want to save space but you don't want to keep you don't want to leave some visual behind, then maybe a multi-row card visual might be helpful in that sense. So it whatever I keep putting in, it'll keep adding and showing that in this kind of row visual here. So if I put something like customer ID, it'll just do a count of customer ID, or it should have done that, but it's not done it. So let me quickly do a count. And sorry, this will be a the count distinct. So it'll tell me there are 793 customers in our data set. We have sold about 38,000 items or products. This is the profit we made. This is the sales that we've made. It's not great from a visual perspective, but when, like I said, when you have to save space and you have a lot of visuals you want to display, or a lot of KPIs you want to display, maybe a multi-row card might be something you want to look at. And I'll just delete this. I will show you another version of that. And then we have the most unintuitive of them all, the KPI visual. So this, while it appears to be very basic, you can see only three things: value, trend axis, and target. So value is what are we tracking? What is that one KPI that you want to measure and you want to show? In our case, let's say it's sales. Second is trend axis. So trend axis is your date. You have to put in the date column here. So we'll put order date in trend axis. And target is what was the target we wanted to achieve. So in our case, obviously, we don't have any target in the orders. When we look at DAX next week, we will create a target variable. But for now, we don't really have any target. So what I'll do is I'll just take sales and put it in target. So what this does is it'll tell you, this KPI visual tells you what was the goal, as in what was the target, and did we achieve the target or not. So in our case, since I've put sales in target and value, it's the same thing. So this says yes, the target was 713,000 or $713. We achieved $713. You achieved it. That's why it's green. If instead of sales in the target, let's say I put profit, right? So it'll actually, let me reverse that. Let me put profit in the value and sales in the target. So what this tells me is goal was 713. You have only achieved 101. So instead of green, now it's red, and it's telling you that sorry boss, you did not achieve the target or have not achieved the target yet that has been set for you, and that is how much you're lagging behind by. So you're lagging behind by about 85%, which is a huge number, but that is what the KPI visual does. Now, why I am not a fan of this KPI visual is because, see, now you guys know that the total sales are $2.3 million, right? Why are we getting 713 here? The reason we are getting 713 is this KPI visual only takes the last entry in your data set. So this entry, this whatever is the last value of the last month, that is all this KPI visual gives you. It is not a great visual. It is not intuitive at all. But unless that is exactly what you're looking for, that yes, I only want to show or only want to locate the last month or the last quarter, then it's fine. Otherwise, this visual is confuses people more than it conveys the message that you want to convey. It goes well with a filter, like a date filter or something like that, but standalone it is not helpful, it's not useful. And I'll just show you after Muru's question, I'll just show you a potential way of getting around this KPI visual, what else we can do, what else Power BI offers, and why this maybe you might want to look at that rather than this. And in fact, I'll be honest with you, 99% of the time that we worked on these Power BI projects, nobody ends up using this KPI visual. Everybody just uses this card or the multi-row card visual, mostly the card visual, because it's just easier to explain these things rather than let the audience guess what in the world is going on. How do I understand why this goal is not tallying up with the actual sales numbers, etc. So just try and, to be honest, avoid this if you can. Right. So, Muru, you had a question?
Yeah. My question is with that first slide, first visual, the first, the
This
if you go to
multi-row
that,
card?
no, go to that your first one, sales or overview.
Sales overview,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So in that bar chart, if I wanted
Uh-huh.
to drill down to a transactional level, how do I get it?
So can you give me an example? What do you want
Say,
to drill down to exactly?
say for example, storage. Okay, I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
see only the transactions relating to that storage.
Okay. So
Can
you
I
want to look at, okay, understood. In that case, you will have to put I'll actually show you that in a different example after we do data modeling, right? It's a good question. It is possible to answer your question. It's entirely possible. So when we do that data modeling, when we connect two different tables, I'll just show you that drill down option there. So when I click
yeah,
on, let's say, storage, we'll go down to whatever you want. You can go down to individual values, or if I click on storage, I can go down to what are the products in storage, how much sales did we get there. If I click on a certain product, we can go down to each individual order for that. So that is possible. I'll just show you that when we
exactly,
get to that part.
exactly. Yeah, thank you.
All right. So Diksha, let me know if that answered your KPI question, if that is what you were looking for.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
let me just show you the other KPI that I was referring to. Let me just get rid of this. So there are, so these are the different, what, 25, 30 visuals that, Power BI offers us in terms of what you want to do. And most of the time in all the projects that you'll end up doing, these visuals are more than good enough to create these multi reports and dashboards and whatever. But there are certain times, and those certain times don't always arrive, at least in the industry, but they're very helpful when you're practicing and learning Power BI, when you feel that these visuals that Microsoft has given us, maybe they're not good enough for what we are looking for personally. So what can we do if you want to go beyond these visuals? And this is where Power BI shines as compared to any other BI tool that I have worked with, and this is where custom visuals come into play. There's a caveat with custom visuals that you need to be signed in with an official account to access these custom visuals. Either a university or a college ID or your work ID has to be connected to a Microsoft account. Only then will it work. You can't log in with Gmail or Yahoo Mail or whatever other mails are there. Those will not work. Even Outlook and Live and Hotmail will not work. It has to be an official ID, either a university or a work ID. Otherwise, this will not work. So I'll show you, in case you don't have that, just just look at my screen. Maybe when you get the chance, you can utilize that. So to get these custom visuals that are not there in the default view, there are multiple ways to do it. I can either go to insert here in the ribbon, either go to insert and go to this more visuals button, and I can click on from my files or from app source. So that's one option. Or I can more easily go to this visualizations pane. You'll notice there are three dots here where it says get more visuals. Click on that and you get these the same options, but in a different view. You get more visuals, import a visual from a file. So when you click on get more visuals, what this does is, just give it a second, it connects to the Microsoft Power BI community, and people like you and me who've been working with Power BI for a while, they got frustrated with the default visuals that Power BI offers, and they created their own visuals and they put that here online in the community for other people to take advantage of. So this is where you'll find, I don't know, there are hundreds and hundreds of visuals here that you can look at. And if you are lucky enough to have an account, that official account that lets you look at these visuals, you can, most of them are free. There are some paid visuals here as well, but we don't need to get into that. So here you can spend some time, 10-15 minutes, to get what are some of the visuals that we can find here. So some of the ones I use are this scroller, which I'll just show you probably next week when we create measures in DAX. But here I am very fond of a radar chart, though it does not have a lot of business value. But a radar chart, things like a Gantt chart, word cloud, which we'll look at in a second, advanced card visual, sunburst. So there are a lot of visuals here depending on what it is that you want to visualize, and you can pick those out from here. If you're confused or you just simply understandably don't want to go through the entire list, you can also filter by certain categories. So if you're sure what you're looking for example, you want to look at a comparison between different things, I can click on comparison and you'll get these different charts in the comparison category. Something called lipstick bar, it's first time I'm hearing of it, but all these different charts are here. If you want to look at infographics, then you have these animated charts, calendars, etc., etc. All of those different things are here. Correlation gives you only 4 charts, but so basically this is how you can dive deeper into this and look at what it is that you're looking for. So if I go to KPI here, you can see by the number of charts in the KPI category that people are not happy with the Microsoft default KPI card, and a lot of people have made their own versions. So here you can select the one that you prefer. Interestingly enough, you'll notice the second one is actually by Microsoft themselves. So why they haven't added this into the default view, I have no idea. But there's Power KPI Matrix, there's Power KPI. So if you click on any of these custom charts, click on that and give this a second. So if you want to add this to your visualizations pane, all you have to do is just click on this add button. You can read through what it does, all these different things. You can look at this screenshot to see what it brings to the table, what you can expect from that, etc. But if you want to just add it, click on add and give it a second. And here below the default visuals, all these custom visuals are added in their own row. So here if I click on this, you can you'll notice this has been added here. So if I click on sales, if I click on sales, I click on order date, for example, it brings up more of a bar chart than anything else, but it also shows you a KPI card here at the top along with the order date, etc. All those different things are there. You can add secondary Wi-Fi, add profit here. It'll add another value here at the top. So you can play around with this. It's not very intuitive in terms of what it does, but the advantage is that instead of relying on these cards that we have, I can pick up these all the other cards that are there, and based on that I can make my own selections. But I want you to guys to keep in mind that this card, for example, advanced card, does not work on all machines. And I want to use this example. I'm not going to click on add, because whenever I click on add for this card, it completely freezes my machine. It crashes my machine. So there are some visuals. It's up to you. It'll mostly be trial and error. I can't tell you apart from this which one. But there are some visuals that may not work with your machine or your system. But you really can't know that before trying them out. So it could be that for you this advanced card will work flawlessly, for me it does not. So there are some glitches that will happen, that's inevitable when you know, use these charts that come up in the industry. What I wanted to show you was this word cloud, which sometimes I have found helpful when it's not a senior audience. So if I click on add here, for example, and I click on word cloud here, and word cloud in terms of, for example, I want to look at subcategory by sales. So what this does, word cloud, as I'm sure you guys know, is the higher the magnitude of the value, the bigger the word will be. So we know that phones and chairs, when we looked at these values here, phones and chairs are the highest selling, that's why they're the biggest words here, followed by whatever else the words are. So this is how you can play around with these custom visuals, get them in, play around, see what you can do with it. If you worked with a timeline slicer in Excel, this is the same thing in Power BI. If you want to try that out, so try out these different visuals, see which ones you like, which ones you don't. And you never know when you might find them helpful for client projects down the line. But keep in mind, please, that not a lot of clients will allow you to create these custom visuals. A lot of clients say, please stick to the standard visuals that you see here, please don't import new visuals, we don't want that. So based on that, obviously you'll have to select what you want. But if you get the chance, if you're lucky enough, you can look at those thousands of visuals, hundreds of visuals that are there, and pick them out. And once you're done with that, if you feel, no, this is not something I actually wanted, I want to get rid of that, then you can always right click on whichever visual you want to get rid of. So if, for example, let's say word cloud, right click, oh sorry, not right click, they've changed that. So just go to the same thing, click on the three dots, go to remove a visual, and select the visual you want to get rid of. So let's say I want to get rid of word cloud, I'll say remove, and it's gone. But keep in mind, if you remove that from here, wherever you've placed it in Power BI, whichever report dashboard, it'll also disappear from there. So just keep that in mind, that this is reliant on being present in the visualization pane, otherwise it's going to disappear from your report itself. And final point before, if you have any questions, I'll just ask that. But keep in mind that while this appears to be very nice, that I'll keep adding more and more visuals, but the more visuals you keep adding here to this list, to this row, the slower Power BI becomes. So if you add 10 different custom visuals because you feel you need that for the report, that's all fine. But if it's an 8 GB laptop or a 4 GB laptop, then there is a good chance your entire system, every time you open this Power BI file, it will take just slightly longer to open, but that's the price you have to pay for those custom visuals. All right, so any questions, guys, on the custom visuals? I just remove this last one.
No, all good.
All right, perfect. Okay, just give me a second. Okay, I have the map visual which we have left, and then we look at filters before we'll take a quick 5-minute break. So the map visual is something that, I'll be honest with you, I've probably used twice in the last 5 years in either Tableau or Power BI. Mostly because I have not worked with US data, I've worked with Indian data or Asian data to be precise, and Power BI and Tableau are not great at plotting very minute level of data in the Asian continent. And I'll explain why in a second. But let's look at the visual here. I'll just talk through the complexity of the visual. So map visuals are there are two map visuals. One is the default map and the other is a filled map. This default map is not very useful. When you are looking at this later, you can check out why that is the case. Most of the time, in fact, all of the time, you will end up using a filled map. So let's click on a filled map and let me just populate the entire screen. And here we want to plot, let's say, the sum of sales by state. So we have United States data only, there's no other data here. So we will click on, let's say, state. Give this a second. And here you can see United States has come up very nicely. And at the bottom right, you can see it's a I don't know what a TomTom is. I think it's a company. I might be getting it wrong. And it's a Microsoft Bing Map, official Microsoft corporation, etc., etc. So unsurprisingly, Microsoft, if your data or your locations rather are in North America, US, Canada, etc., then it's very easy to plot. It is no, it's very seamless, no issues at all. In fact, if your data is from Europe, it's still easy to plot. But as soon as it goes, let's say in India, it becomes a little difficult for these maps to plot certain cities in India, because their database that they have don't doesn't extend to a lot of Indian cities or Indian towns. So one of the examples I want to, I can't show you that because that data is client confidential, but one of the examples that I want to bring out was we were plotting this, we were working with this marketing firm where we wanted to show them uh, where the most orders were coming from, what was the most densely populated area in terms of the orders that were being placed for them. And it turned out that that town in Uttar Pradesh was not there on the map that Microsoft offered. So there are ways of getting that in if you have latitude and longitude level information, which is not, by the way, Google Maps is fine. To get that information, you can extract that latitude and longitude from Google Maps, put that in, but it's not 100% accurate. And for that marketing firm, 100% accuracy was very vital. So we ended up not using a map at all at the end, unfortunately. We had to go with simple tabular data. But in those cases, when you're working with non-US or non-Europe data, then a map might not be the best solution for that particular visual that you're doing. But if you're lucky enough, if it's US or North America, Europe data, then most of these values are perfectly fine. It plots them superbly well, and there are no problems at all in that sense. And you can see here that it picked up, just by putting state and location, it picked up the entire United States map. I can zoom in, zoom out using the scroll wheel on my machine, or control and the plus icon on my keyboard. So you can do all of those different things. But right now, this map is essentially useless. It's just telling, okay, great, these are the states in US. Great. What do I do with that? What kind of insights? Nothing there is that we can bring out of that. So what we can do here is, but first, by putting state and location, we can go to the format your visual. How to format your visual? First of all, expand map settings. You can see here there are different themes that you can look at the map. By default, it shows you what it calls a road theme, but you can also look at an aerial theme. It's nothing, the map will remain the same. It's just that the way you see it, the colors and all of that change. So you can look at a dark version, a light version, a grayscale version, etc. So I'll stick to aerial here. And if I go to controls, auto zoom is enabled by default. I can turn this off. So sorry, what yeah, I can add zoom buttons here. Unfortunately, that went away. So here you can see the zoom button has been added on the top right of my screen. So I can zoom in, keep zooming out, etc. So I can do all those different things. And you can play around with this if you want. It's like I said, it's very useful for a firm that's looking at geo marketing, geolocation targeting, etc. It's useful in that sense. And I'll just turn this off, and I'll turn auto zoom on. So you can look at all these different things when you're practicing. What I wanted to show you was this fill colors. So if I expand fill colors, default color it takes is green, because that's the color we've taken as a theme here. There's a button next to it called conditional formatting. So what we want to do here is we want to show all the states by different colors based on the sales that have happened. So if it's a state that has seen a lot of sales numbers are high, it should probably be let's say a darker color or a brighter color. If the sales are very low, then it should be a very lighter color, things like that, or should be a different color. So you can pick all of those things out by clicking on this FX button next to the default colors button. So if I click on this FX stands for function of. So click on this, a new menu will come up. This is not as let's say expansive as the conditional formatting you see in Excel, not even close, but it does offer a few useful things. So in our case, what you want to do is here, if you look at format style, by default, it'll say gradient. You have a couple of others which we'll look at later. So we'll keep it to gradient for now. So second question is, what field should we base this on? You want to look at states by different colors, but what should those colors represent? In our case, they should represent the sales. So here where it says count of state, click on this drop down, click on the drop down, you'll get the table, orders table, and here find sales. So scroll down, scroll down, scroll down, find sales. We want sum of sales, so that's fine. How should we format empty values? We don't really have empty values, so it's okay, but you can specify colors if you have empty values in your data set, etc. And I'll also add a middle color just to add an extra layer to it. And you can select here that the lowest value should be a certain color, the highest should be a certain color, and the middle can be something. So here this is fine, I don't have to change anything. So lowest value you can select from this palette. If you don't like this colors, you can go to more colors and select something from here. All of these different options are here. And if I click on OK, what this does is based on the highest number that you have, the maximum number that you have, it colors all the states accordingly. And that is a problem. Why is that a problem? It's because you notice here California probably has the highest sales. How much sales does it have? We can add this here. So I'll take sales, put that into tooltip. So this has about $500,000 sales, right? That is a huge number. If I look at Montana, for example, that's only $5,000. Idaho, $4,000. Washington is decent, but it's not great. Oregon, only 17,000. Kansas, 2,000. Iowa, 5,000. So these are, you can see the difference, right? This is 500,000. This is 5,000, 2,000, 3,000. So these are very low numbers. So the disadvantage of doing what we've just done is it gives more attention and weightage to the maximum value and just colors everything relative to that. So that is why we see most of the states as very light yellow, and just California as a darkish green. If you show this to a senior audience, their first reaction will be, why in the world are we doing so poorly in all the states that we have? That's the first reaction anybody will have to these colors. So what you can do is, if I go back to this, if I go back to the conditional formatting, you can also enter a custom value, that the minimum value, you can put anything here. Let me put 20,000. Middle value, you can put in something here. Highest value, you can put a custom value here. Let's say 50,000. And if I click on OK, so what this does is it'll just change things a little bit more. Right? I just put two random values there, so you saw a slight difference here. Anything above the maximum value will take the whatever was the color, green color. Anything between 10 and 50,000 will take, if I go here, will take this color, yellow, golden, whatever. And anything below 10,000 will kind of become colorless, right? So you can see those no colors are reflecting in all these different states. So you can play around with these numbers. If I say start at 1,000, for example, and anything above 15,000 is great, click on OK. So it'll update that accordingly. So whatever story it is that you want to tell on with your map, you can play around with these basic conditional formatting options to convey that kind of message in your map visual that you are showing. And this conditional formatting is not just limited to maps. I'll come back to map in this map in a second. If I just take this bar chart and put this here, I can also apply that kind of conditional format to a simple bar chart as well. So if we go here, you'll notice when I go to bars, I have this function of button here as well. So if I say function of, let's say, same thing, I'll just use the same example, sales, lowest value, this I won't change much here. So this will update based on that as well. If you want to apply your middle color, you want to put some own values here, that anything between 1,000 and 5,000 color this, etc, etc. So you can apply all those different things at in this function of conditional formatting button. So all those different things are available. It's not very intuitive. I can't apply any formulas here as such. If For example, only color anything in the last 10 days as a certain color. So if that is the level we want to do, that is not readily available. We can do that using DAX, but at a basic level, these are the options that we have in conditional formatting. Right, so guys, any questions on the map or the formatting part?
Can you go back to the conditional
Hmm,
things? I can just
sure.
the page 2.
Oh, page 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we do this one. All
Is the same, exactly same menu. It's just the visual will obviously differ. That's it.
right. All right. Okay. So this is for the bar chart.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
And instead of sales, if you want to look at, even though the numbers are sales, but you want to color them by profit, which is again a very common thing, you can always do that. And this presents an interesting view that tables, while it's doing well in terms of sales, it is operating probably at a loss or very low profit. So those are the kind of stories and messages we can bring out using conditional formatting. I personally don't prefer these amount of colors. Ideally stick to 3 or maximum 4 colors in any visual, but we can change all of that in the conditional formatting.
Otherwise we become colorblind.
Yeah, correct. All right, guys. So, any questions on this part? All right. Okay. So, everyone, let's do one thing. Let's take a quick 5-minute break. And when we come back, we'll quickly look at filters, and then we'll look at data modeling, and we'll try and answer Muru's question about, drilling deeper into a certain category or something like that. We will try and look at that as well. All right, so everybody else, see you. It's 5:11. I won't stop screen sharing so you can see my clock. It's 5:11. Let's come back at 5:16 p.m. and last 45-50 minutes, we look at those 2-3 things. All right, so I'll see you guys back in 5. All right, everyone, welcome back. Let me just rename this and let me get rid of this. Okay, so we were talking about filters. Let me go back to the report here. So, what are filters and how are they different from slicers? Filters are, if you worked on Excel, filters are exactly the same thing in Power BI as well. So, filters are hidden away in this pane here next to visualization. So, if I just expand this, right now by default, when you don't select any visual, you get two options: filters on this page, filters on all pages. If I select any visual, let's say I'll select this bar chart, you get another one which is called filters on this visual as well. So what this does is, I mean, it's in the name itself. It applies a filter only on this visual, nothing else. Filters on this page only applies on this page, no other pages. Filters on all pages acts like a global filter. So whatever pages you have, let's say you have 10, 15, 20 pages, it'll apply it to all the pages until you obviously tell it to not apply it to a certain page. So all of those different options are here. Let's start by quickly looking at filters on this visual itself. Let me see. Okay, let's apply it on this one itself. So here by default, since we have subcategory and sales in the filter or in the visual, it gives you those two options. You can add more here. You can add, let's say, profit here, for example, and you can say only show me profitable values, etc. So all those different things are here. I'll remove this. So you can keep adding more and more stuff in the filter to do that. But keep in mind that when you share this report with somebody, it when you publish this to Power BI service and you share that through Power BI service with your client or whoever you're sending it to, the filter will be pre-applied if you apply it here. For example, if I say only show me in this bar chart, only show me the phones and chairs category, just don't show me anything else. As you only see two bars, and the client will also see two bars, and the client will not know where the filter is because the client usually does not have the capability or the ability, not the capability, the ability to see these filters. They only see the dashboard, they see the slicers, they cannot see the filter, so they will have no way to change that from their side. And this is a mistake a lot of people, may even people who've been working with Power BI for a while, because there are so many things we are doing throughout the day and so many reports we are creating. These kind of very small things, we applied a filter, we forgot about it. We published this, and we forgot that we applied that filter. So those are things you'll just have to be a little careful about, because clients don't, most of the time, don't know how these things work or where to change these things. So you might want to just double check the report before publishing or sharing it with the end user. So filters work it's very, very straightforward. So sales by subcategory, for example, we have subcategory here. If I expand it, exactly like it works in Excel, I can, select certain things. I can say, okay, only show me appliances and art. So you only see two different bars here. Also show me accessories. You can see that here, and you can see the count next to it as well. So it tells you the count if you find that useful. I'll select all here. So this is very basic level of filtering, and you can see it's also called basic filtering here in filter type. I also have something called advanced filtering, which is not, I mean, it's not advanced, it's just a different way of filtering. So when it says show items when the value, so you have a lot of options here. So let's say you are looking for a very specific thing in that list. I'll type in phones and press apply filter. So it'll just show me the phones here. But this is kind of risky, because if I mistype something, for example, if I type in two S's instead of one, it'll just show me a blank value. So use this if if you have a lot of values and you're very, very sure what is the spelling that you're looking for, then this is helpful. If you want to exclude something, just say does not contain phone, so everything will be visible except the phone subcategory. So all those different things are here in terms of filtering. So try that out, see what you get, what is the comfort level you have with these different options. To clear a filter, it's the same eraser icon, rubber icon next to the header. So I'll just click on this and we are back to our original view. You can also add an and condition or an or condition. So contains phones and storage. So obviously you'll get nothing because there's nothing called phones and storage. But you can put in an or condition. It's either phones or storage. Then you get the answer by looking at both of those things. So those are two, three different filtering options that we have available. If you want to add more conditions here, then that's not possible. So you can only show two conditions. If you want three, four, five different conditions, then you will have to get into DAX to create a kind of a group and then put that into the filters. And it's a longish way of doing it, but at least if it's simple enough, one or two conditions, that is possible using the default options here. So let me go here. And so these are basic and advanced filtering. And there's something called top N, which I find very interesting. So what top N does is it shows you the top whatever number you put in by whatever value you put in. So let me show you that using a different example. Let's say we put customer name and sales here, and I'll convert this into a bar chart. So here we have customer name and let me also enable data labels. So we have customer name and how much sales has that customer got into this particular company. So here we can see Sean Miller highest, Tamara Chen, etc., etc., which is great. Now where this top N comes in is if I expand customer name and go to top N. So I only want to look at the top 10 customers in terms of sales. So all I have to do is select top N in this drop down, go here where it says show top, and I'll put in 10. And by value, you want top 10 by sales. So just drag and drop sales here and click apply filter. So what this is doing is showing you only the top 10 values by sales numbers in terms of the customers that our company has. If you want to look at top 20, we look at top 20, so on and so forth. So you can play around with these numbers based on that. We can also go the other way. We will want to look at bottom 20 customers, bottom 10 customers by sales. Click apply. So here are the bottom 10 customers by sales numbers. This is usually looked at not from a customer perspective, but from a product perspective. You want to see what are the products or services that we're offering that are not maybe bringing in as much sales as we had hoped for, or as much profit or margin as we had hoped for. So we can look at all of that by looking at this top N filter. The thing with the top N filter is, I'll just remove this, is it is only available in filters on this visual. So if I go back here, if I want to apply this top N to everything in my report, that option is not there. I can only apply it on an individual visual by visual basis, not on two or more visuals at the same time. Unfortunately, that's just not how it works. So that, just keep that in mind, that this top N option is only available on filters on this visual, nowhere else. All right, so guys, any questions on filters in this visual? We'll look at the other two now.
No. And just a quick thing. Say, for example,
Hmm.
this dashboard. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Can this be exported to an Excel?
It can be, but not using Power BI desktop. So once you publish this on Power BI
Okay.
service, then you can export it as an Excel, a PowerPoint, a PDF, whatever you
Okay.
prefer, but
Okay.
not on this version, not
Desktop.
on the yeah, on the desktop.
Yeah, sorry, I too had one same doubt.
Yeah,
Like
Shane.
here we can transform the data, right? So the
Hmm.
transformed data can be export to Excel.
Yes, yes. So whatever changes you make here, once you publish that to your Power BI service, then whatever you extract from there.
Mhm.
Just so no, when you say transform, what do you mean by transform?
Like
So
we
here,
are
see,
doing all
hmm,
cleaning up everything we can do, right?
right,
Data.
We'll,
uh,
yeah.
right. So all of that, no, that's a good question. So your data source will remain your data source, so that you can't extract. What you can extract is this dashboard view in Excel. So all of this will extract as a dashboard in Excel, but the data that you have will remain underlying in your Excel sheet that you brought in.
Can
Okay.
can
I'll
can we go
actually,
to the query? Can we go to the Power Query and export into as a table in Excel?
that is also not possible. So
Oh,
Microsoft has put in a kind of let's say block which it prevents you from exporting those things, but it is, you can export certain things using Power BI service. I'll show you that in our last session where we have time
Okay.
for Power BI service. Hopefully your question will be, I think I got a sense of what you guys are looking for, but most likely you will be disappointed, but I'll just show you that when we get there on session 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Okay. What was I showing? Filters in this visual. So this was the on the visuals part. Similarly, it's pretty straightforward. If I want to apply certain filters on the entire report, this filters on the page works exactly like a slicer does. So if I take region for example, you can notice there's no top n anymore. So you can look at only the east region. Then this updates only for the east region. You want to look at south, you can do south, etc. So this works exactly like a slicer does, and you can play around with this advanced and all that here. I'll just remove this. So filters in this page is essentially a copy of the slicer, except that slicer is taking up some space on my report. Filters will be hidden away on the right hand side. So depending on what kind of report or dashboard you're creating, you can select the ones you want. And finally, we have filters on all pages, which is a global filter. So if I put something, let's take segment, and if I, let's say, we only want to analyze how we are doing in terms of the corporate segment, whatever we sold to the corporates, B2B, etc. So if I click on this, obviously this changes, but this changes as well. So you can see here, scatter plot also has a corporate segment that's come in. And if you go to map, we are only looking at the corporate segment here, corporate sales. Line corporate sales only. If I apply consumer, notice how this changes. This has also changed. Scatter plot is also changed. If I remove this, we are now looking at, and notice the threshold lines also change based on what you're selecting. And coming back, this also changes here as well. So you can look at these different, global filters based on whatever you want to apply across the different visuals. I would advise you to, I mean, global filters is very, very tricky in terms of what it can do. I would advise you not to use global filters as much as possible because Power BI is not very intuitive in terms of global filters. But if it is something that, there's no option left to you, everybody's forcing you this, put a gun to your head that you have to use it, no option, then obviously you have to use it. But try and only work with filters in this visual or filters in this page as much as possible, and see that. And to answer Muru, your question about the slices affecting only this page versus the other pages, if I go to, they've changed where it was visible here, just give me a second. So there's something called sync slices. If it removed that, there it is. So sync slices in the view section in the ribbon. So if you have multiple slices, I just click on sync slices and go to map. So you can put a slicer here as well, and when you go to sync slices, that will show up here. So if you want to control this dashboard and this map with the same slicer, then you can put that slicer here as well. Click on sync slicer. So just like it works with pivot tables, that slicer will affect this visual, this map sheet, and the sales overview sheet as well at the same time.
Yeah.
So that is what
Got it.
sync slices does.
Thank
All
you.
right, so I'll just save this. All right, guys. So any questions on this? Otherwise, I'll move on to the data modeling part, which is
That's
probably
the
the
most
most
important.
important. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. What did we have on page 2? Okay, I'll just call this customer sales. All right. So where is my sheet? Okay, so I'll just spend 5 minutes on the theory before we go to the practical part, because without the theory, the practical is not going to make a lot of sense. But before I look at these terminologies and things that we need for data modeling, I just want to ask you guys if do you guys have any experience in let's say SQL? Do you know what joins are? Do you know what schemas are, etc.? Do you have any experience with that?
No, sorry.
Okay. Everybody else?
Yeah, just theory part and little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Shagina. Diksha, Deepa, Junitha, Ashish, do you guys have any experience in SQL?
Not yet.
Okay. All right. Okay, sure. That I wanted to ask you because that gives me a sense of how to explain these concepts and to share the resources after that accordingly. So don't worry about what a schema is in terms of the definition. A schema is, just think of schema as a diagrammatic view of the different tables or different sheets that you have. That's what a schema is. There are broadly three types of schemas, but you should worry about only two of them in terms of Power BI or in terms of Excel, and those are star schema and Snowflake schema. So what I just come to what these two are in a second. But before that, just 2 points or two key terms you should know about, and those are the primary key and the foreign key. What these are nothing. They are just a way of connecting two different tables. So this, just look at this example. We have two tables. We have a people table and we have an orders table. So in the people table, we have things like the person ID, last name, first name, and the age of that person. And here in orders table, we have the order ID, order number, and person ID, right? Now, what we want to do is we want to understand which person placed which order. So in this case, I don't know that as two separate tables. I have no idea, right? I mean, I can try and compare it. Okay, person ID 1, okay, here, okay, this order. That's fine. But when you're doing it at a much larger scale, like we'll just do in a second, you would ideally want to look at, okay, this person placed these many orders on this particular date. Right now, unfortunately, it is simply not possible to look at that manually and do it. That does not make any practical sense at all. So we have to find a way to connect the tables. Now if you've worked in Excel, this is nothing but lookups. We are looking up a certain value in a secondary or a reference table and importing that into the primary table. That's what we're doing. If you've not worked on lookups, don't worry about it. So what this is doing is, what a primary key is primary key is what is that column that has a unique value for every row that we have. So in this case, in the persons table, a primary key is your person ID, because person ID will always be 1 2 3 4 5, so that every row represents a unique person there. In orders table, your primary key is the order ID. One order ID 1, 2, 3, 4, because every row will have a unique value for that order ID. So that is my primary key. If any column has a duplicate value, like order ID is 1 and the other value is also 1, then that cannot be a primary key. If there are any duplicate values in a column, it cannot be a primary key. It always has to have unique values for every row. Otherwise, it's not a primary key. Just keep that in mind. I will come back to this using a practical example. Just keep this definition in mind: unique and duplicate. On the other hand, when we want to connect the two tables, what do we want to do? We want to look at first what is the common column between them. Without a common column, there's no way to connect the table. So what is that common column between them? In this case, we have a person ID and a person ID here. So in this case, person ID is the common column. So person ID in the persons table is a primary key. But in this table, orders table, person ID is a foreign key, because notice here there are two threes here. So it cannot be a primary key, right? There are duplicate values. So in this case, person ID primary key, person ID in orders table is a foreign key. And based on the person ID, we are connecting the two tables on the person ID column. If that is confusing, if this is the first time you're hearing it, that's perfectly fine. Don't worry about it. You don't necessarily need to remember what is a primary key, what is a foreign key right now. That will come with experience. The more examples you do, the more tables you join, the more data modeling you do, these things will become clearer the more you do it. Nobody gets it at the first going, so that's perfectly fine. Just keep in mind that the easiest way to remember this is, if I want to connect two tables, two or more tables, I have to find a common column between them. That's it. If primary key, foreign key are difficult to understand, don't worry about it right now. Right. So with that, I want to go to the next concept and talk about what is a fact table and what is a dimension table. So fact table is your main table, your primary table, which has a bunch of information like sales, how much sales did we make, quantity, profit, margin, number of customers, etc., etc. So that all these values, all these measures, all this information that you have is in your primary table, and that is usually called as a fact table. A dimension table, on the other hand, is slightly smaller in nature. Dimension table is very specific to something. For example, a table that only has product level information, only customer level information, only region level information, only category level information. So where it has category ID 1, 2, 3, 4, customer ID 1, 2, 3, 4, customer name, customer age, customer date of birth, etc. So it only has that specific information, that is called as a dimension table. And this fact table and dimension table together make up what is called as a star schema. This is the easiest schema that is there. Power BI is built to be optimized for the star schema. And what a star schema does is it has this fact table in the middle and dimension tables all around this star table, or this fact table rather. So you can see here the fact table is called a sales table. You have things like sales number, order ID, sales value, quantity, this that. So you have a lot of different things in this fact table. And then you have very specific tables like product information, product key, product alternate key, date, reseller, employee ID, employee age, employee name, employee joining date, employee salary, employee level, etc. So all of those are specific to employee only. Territory key like region, area, sector, territory, etc., etc. So all of those are very specific to territory or region level information. So when those very specific tables are there, those are called dimension tables. When they are more general in nature, where they have a mix of things like sales, quantity, etc., then they become fact tables. And I know I'm repeating myself, but this will for sure be confusing the first time you hear these different things. So what my suggestion is, obviously watch this recording again later, but I will be sharing, I'll just show you a few resources right now before we wrap up today's class. Go through those resources. Those are very nice and different explanations of these concepts that I've just mentioned: fact table, dimension, star schema, and all of that. And they tell you, or they give you an idea of one, why is this important, and two, how do you differentiate between a fact table and a dimension table when it comes down to it. Right, so I will show you those resources. In a fact table, every dimension table that you have will connect to this main table in the middle. Right? Every dimension table will connect to the main table. If that is not the case, if let's say there is no common column between a dimension table and a fact table, what do we do then? Then we come to the concept of a snowflake schema. So a snowflake schema looks something like this. So let's say this dimension table has no direct relation to the fact table. So what do I do now? How do I get that information? Then we have to find a different route to the fact table. So this table, this dimension connects to another dimension, and because of this connection, it connects back to the fact table. So when you don't have a direct connection between a certain dimension table and the fact table, then you can go and connect the dimension to another dimension which connects to the fact table. Quite often you'll see snowflake schema is can be very complicated to understand. That's why nobody learns it right off the bat. You start off with a star schema, you understand how that works, and then you go on to the snowflake schema. So here it can go on and on and on. So you, let's say you have a table here which connects to another table, another table, another table, then dimension which connects to the fact table. So that is not ideal. Microsoft definitely does not recommend doing that, but if you don't have an option, you don't have an option. That is where things become very complicated. Power BI becomes slow, everything's become slow. Your refreshes become slow, your performance becomes slow, everything. But if we can't find a way to get around that, then that is just the way of how it works in a snowflake schema. Most videos that you'll see on YouTube, all these experts, Microsoft experts talking about these schemas, always emphasize that try and perform or try and create a star schema as much as possible and avoid a snowflake schema. But if it's not possible at all to do that, then you will have to well, follow Snowflake schema and find a way around that. So what I will do here is I will go here and I'll just show you guys these two star and Snowflake schema in action, so you can get a sense of what in the world am I talking about. What we'll do here is, first of all, I'll go to this model tab. I'll go to the model tab, and here we have the orders table, right? We have the orders table, which this is a fact table. Why? Because it has a mix of different information like category, city, quantity, sales, region. It has a mix of everything here. So we can consider this as a primary table or our fact table. Now what we'll do is we will get the other table into play as well. So I'll just go to Excel workbook and I'll import this and give this a second. So I will also get the people table into play, which has the person and the basically the area head and which area they are leading or heading. So I will just click on, so you can see there's a problem here. Person and region are appearing as the first row. So I'll just go to transform data. Just give me a second. And I will convert this person and region into the first row. So I'll just go here, use first row as headers and go home and close and apply. So give this a second. Should come up. It's a very small table. There we go. Okay. So here what happens is the people table, like we saw, if I go here, the people table is unique or is a dimension table because every row represents a unique region: west, east, central, and south, right? This can appear or act as a primary key because every row is unique. There are no duplicate values here. So this is my dimension table. And now by default, Power BI is usually smart enough to understand what, when you import multiple tables, it is smart enough to understand what are the common columns between two tables. So here it's by automatically understood that it's created a connection between them. But let me just show you, let me delete that and show you how to do it. So here we know that region exists here. We've been working with that. Region is there in my orders table. We've been working with that for a while. So region is here, and region is also available in my people table. So that is the common column between the two tables that we have. So now when we want to connect them, all I have to do manually is drag region from the people table, drag it from people table and drop it on top of region in the orders table. Right, so I'll just repeat that. Take region from your dimension table and drop it on top of region in your fact table, and this will create the relationship between the two. Don't worry about one to many and all of that right now. I will explain all that in the next class. But here just keep in mind that this has created or established a relationship between people and orders. And now if I go here and I open up a new page, if I want to answer a very simple question, like so Pranav, tell me how much sales did each area head make? Right. So what I have to do is I'll open up the people table. I'll say person. I'll say sales, and I'll just zoom in so you guys can see. So here I can see that I'll just sort this in descending. So Anna made the most sales, followed by Chuck, Kelly, and Cassandra here, right? Great. Perfect. But this will not be possible if you don't establish a relationship between the two. What happens if we don't? What happens if I import this but I don't create a relationship between, I just keep them as two separate tables. Now if somebody asks me, Pranav, show me how much sales did each area head or person make, this is what you will get. Without a relationship between the two, it takes the overall sales value $2.2 million and it shows that value for every single area ahead or person that we have in our data set. And obviously we know that's wrong. That's not the right value. But without a relationship, that is the output that you'll get. Some this bizarre value, because right now Power BI has absolutely no idea what is the common column. What am I trying to do here? No clue, because there's no connection between the two. And the annoying part is it does not give an error. Ideally it should tell me, like in Excel when we do VLOOKUP, it gives you a hashtag value error or something like that, that there is you did something wrong, I can't find a connection, or something is wrong there. Unlike that, Power BI doesn't tell you that. So it'll still try and give you an answer, and this is the kind of answer you'll get. You'll think, yeah, I know, I'll correct that. But in the heat of the moment, it's 6 p.m. on a Thursday or a Friday evening, you just want to get home, and these are the things that a lot of people overlook. And well, turns into a disaster at some point down the line. So that is why creating a connection is very, very important. If I just do this again and go back, we are back to our view of what we were looking at. So that is why it's important to create a connection between the two tables you have, if you obviously want to create some insights out of that.
Pranab, just one
Yeah, Muru.
question. Does
Hmm.
it have to be like, how you dropped from the dimension table
Uh-huh.
to the fact table?
Not
Can it
necessarily.
be?
You can do it the
Oh,
other
yeah,
way as
yeah.
well. Yeah,
Okay,
you
okay,
can
okay.
do it the other way. Oh, I was
Okay,
just
okay.
showing you that because it's easier to visualize it in that sense, but you can do it the other way as well.
No, no, just a thought.
Sure. There's another way to do it. It's a good question. So if I delete this relationship, if for example, you don't prefer dragging, and I'll tell you what the problem with dragging is. What happens is if I take region, I know I want to drag it and drop it on top of region here, but let's say my hand slips or something happens and I drop it on quantity, for example, it'll still create a connection. It's very adamant, it's not going to show you an error, it'll still create a connection. And if I take my mouse and hover it over this line, you'll notice region and quantity are highlighted, telling me that these are the connections that it's made. So if I go back here, notice what happens. It's gone, names are gone, you're only seeing the overall sales value because Power BI is completely befuddled as to what is the connection. And because there is no relation to person and quantity in terms of the common column, it has no idea what to give you. So that is a kind of very small but a kind of risk that happens when we try and drag things on top of each other. So if I just delete this, if you want to do it manually, that is entirely possible. So here at the top in your model tab, you have something called manage relationships. So if you go to manage relationships, it'll tell you there are, obviously because I deleted that, there are no relationships. So either you can auto detect, which will work in this case, but if I click on new, I can manually select things. So if I say orders and it takes people by default, just click on the common column region and click on OK. The relationship will come in here, click on close, and the relationship will be established here. So depending on what you prefer, dragging and dropping or manually doing it, you can choose the way you want. The reason this auto detect works and the reason why it happened automatically before I did it when I imported the file is because the two columns are called the same thing. It's called region, it's called region here. So it's easy for Power BI to figure that out. If in this case, let's say in the orders table, region was called area, then Power BI would not give you an automatic relationship because it does not understand what you're talking about. It does not know that region and area are the same thing. So then you will have to manually put region on top of area and create that relationship. It's easy when the columns are the same or named the same, but you can always manually do it in that sense. All right, so that is what a star schema is. It's very straightforward. The dimension table has to find a connection with the fact table. And why Power BI is optimized for a star schema, why Tableau is optimized for a star schema, is because these are very straightforward to execute for the tool itself. You have a direct connection between a dimension and a fact table. Where it becomes confusing is this. So I have this example here for you guys. I'll share this link for this file in a second. This is what a Snowflake schema looks like. So just give this a second. I will, it's opening up right now. When the a few dimension tables don't have a direct relation to the fact table. So here we go.
One more question, Pranav.
Yeah, Muru.
You know how in the fact table and the people's table, I mean, like
Uh-huh.
the dimension table, it has a, icon with eyes. Okay, next, just before that, three
These
dots.
ones.
No, no, yeah, on the left, just before
Oh,
that,
this
three
size.
dots. Ah, yeah. What
Uh-huh.
is that? Those are all.
So it basically hides the all the columns here. So it's hidden in report view. So if I go here, I'll actually just show. Just give me a second. My
Okay.
laptop is acting up. 1 second. Come on, move. Okay, it's refusing to move. So this is a big file. I think that's why it's struggling here. Can I get it here? Oh, finally. Okay, so Muru, I'll just come to your question in a second.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
this
yeah.
is what a snowflake schema looks like. I'll just zoom out, guys. Sorry for that. So this is what a snowflake schema looks like, and here we have a bunch of information, right? So here you have the sales table in the middle, which is your fact table, and then you have a bunch of dimension tables like product subcategory, category, stores, geography, etc. So here notice that product subcategory. Now, if you want to answer a question like how much sales did I make for a certain product subcategory? Right now, there is no direct relation between a product subcategory and the sales table. There's no common column between the two. So what we have to do is we have to connect the product subcategory to the product table or the product dimension table, then the product table to the sales table. Similarly, category goes to subcategory, goes to product, goes to sales. When you don't have a direct relation with the fact table, you have to find another dimension table to jump on the back of, and then that will find a way to the fact table. This is what a snowflake schema looks like. The disadvantage of this is, as you can imagine, if I want to look at a certain product category in terms of sales numbers or how much have I sold or where have I sold that, whatever, then what under the hood, you don't have to worry about it explicitly, right? When you're creating visuals and anything, you don't have to worry about that. But what you do have to worry about is the time this will take. So what this does under the hood is it looks at product category, it looks at the connection between these two, then that connection goes to the connection between these two, then that connection goes back to the fact table. So it takes time to execute these queries, it takes time to execute that. And if you have data that, let's say you have 500,000 rows or even 100,000, 1 lakh rows, 2 lakh rows, the bigger the data, the slower this entire process becomes. So the slower the refresh happens, the slower the execution happens, everything is slower. And that's why a snowflake schema should ideally be avoided if at all possible. How do you avoid that in these kind of cases? How do I avoid that? Then see, you'll have to take a call. You can either go back to your data source and combine product category and product subcategory into a single table, for example. I'm not saying you should do that, I'm saying that is an idea that you can do. You can combine everything into the product table. You can do those different kinds of things. It comes down to what does your project, your client, and you personally prefer. Do you want to, is it okay just spending a little bit more time but keeping everything clean like this, or do you want to just put everything together in one dimension table and look at that? But there are disadvantages and advantages to either approach. But I just want to show you this snowflake schema and how that works. And so there is, if you want to download this Power BI model that I just showed you guys, a snowflake schema, I'll just put this link in the chat window. It's an official Microsoft link itself. It's great for practicing as well, right? So all the visual that we've created, if you want to practice that on this data set, you can do that. So I've just put the link in the chat window. You can download that. I think it's a pretty big file, by the way. It's 1 GB or something like that. The other thing I wanted to mention, sorry, is this something called a Kimball methodology. It's the most popular thing in the schema world, let's say, when it comes to star schema, snowflake schema. If you want to dive a little deeper into how this works under the hood, what are some of the best practices, approaches, methodologies, all of that, then the what Microsoft follows, what everybody else, to be honest, follows, is this Kimball life cycle methodology. If you want to dive a little deeper into how this works, etc., then let me just put this link in the chat window. And finally, this is probably the best video that I have found in terms of understanding what are some of the best practices for optimizing data models, for creating quick and efficient fact tables, dimension tables, connections, relationships. All of that is in this channel. I've just put this link here, but you can explore this Guy in a Cube channel. It's one of the best channels for learning Power BI, especially when you're new to it. But even when you've been working with it for a while, this channel is very helpful. So do check out these 2-3 links that I have put in. And this is essentially how it works. Right. So what I would want you guys to do is, if I can go back here, is just play around with this Contoso model, which is here. Just play around with this model, delete relationships, see what kind of errors and effects happen if you don't have a direct relationship, etc., etc. So play around with this. This is probably the best schema to understand what you can and what you cannot do with data models in Power BI. That's why Microsoft has made this open source. So play around with these different tables, create visuals, practice what we've learned in terms of data models here, and see what you can do. I have just one final thing I want to cover, but I'll just take a pause if you guys have any questions here right now.
Is it possible to share these links when you're sending that the resources
I will do that for
in
sure.
the yeah, thanks.
What? Yeah, one final thing is, so your question, Muru, is what this IE icon does. Is since I clicked on this, what this does in the report view, notice that entire table is gone. So if you only want to hide that for whatever
Okay,
reason, certain
okay,
columns, tables, you can hide that in the data model view itself.
all right, got it. And one
And
more, my last question is that drill down.
please. Sorry, you were saying
No,
something, Muru? I missed that.
yeah, the drill down. What I was asking in the
That is
beginning.
exactly what I was coming to. So here, when we have to do this drill down, right? So to do the drill down, remember, we have to create a kind of hierarchy before we can take advantage of the drill down. So what I will do is I'll just remove this. Let me zoom in and out a little bit. So here, let's create a quick hierarchy, and let's see the drill down that Muru was asking about. So to create a hierarchy, it's very straightforward. Let's say that you want to create a, let's say, a location hierarchy, right? So here we have a lot of location level information. So let me start by state. So I'll put or let me start by region rather. So I'll write, to create any hierarchy, right click on wherever you want the hierarchy to start. So right click on region, you'll get this option of create hierarchy. So let's go to create hierarchy, and you can see here it's called a region hierarchy. If you want to rename that, I can just call it location hierarchy. And if I expand this, the region is there, right? I can put more stuff in. So let's say I put state, or if dragging doesn't work, right click, go to add to hierarchy, put this in location hierarchy. I'll also put city here. So you can keep adding stuff into the hierarchy. There are two advantages of this primarily. One is obviously what we'll be seeing drill down, but the other is that, see, right now these columns are features are located everywhere in your orders table. City is here, state is at the bottom, a region is somewhere in the middle. So when you want to save yourself time, if you have a lot of columns, let's say you have 50, 60, 70 columns, and these are all distributed alphabetically, you want ideally similar columns in the same place, like product information, product ID, product name, uh, category, subcategory. I want them together. So you can create a hierarchy for them. And what you can practice is you can create a product hierarchy as well. So it just makes things easier to locate, if nothing else. So here we've created a location hierarchy. Now what we'll do is I'll create a very simple bar chart here, and we will put person and their sales value here. But I also want the hierarchy here. So I'll take location hierarchy and I'll put that below the person. Why did I do that? The reason I'm doing that is, now if I want to drill down, like Muru had asked us, that let's say we want to analyze each person's performance. For example, let's say Chuck McGee, we want to understand, let me enable data labels. So you want to understand how much sales did Chuck McGee do? Where did Chuck McGee do his sales? Which location, which state, which city? You want to understand all of that. Now I can drop a table, a pivot table kind of thing, and look at it in a tabular format, but everybody prefers a visual format. It's easier to digest and interpret. So what we can do is, when we put person and location hierarchy here, I can go to this arrow pointing downwards in the bar chart, which says click to turn on drill down. So if I click on this, it has a black halo around it. Nothing happens except that. But now if I want to dive deeper, let's say I want to understand Chuck's performance. If I click on Chuck's bar, it dives deeper into the next level. So after person, we have region here. So if I click on East, I can see here, so Chuck is operating in the East region. And in the East region, Chuck is mostly getting sales from the from New York State, then from Pennsylvania, Ohio, New Jersey, so on. And in New York, which cities is Chuck operating in? Which are the highest performing cities? You can see, unsurprisingly, it's New York City and Buffalo, Long Beach, etc. Whatever are different options there. If I want to go back up, I can drill up and I can say, okay, I want to look at Anna. How's Anna doing? Anna's operating in the West region. In West, Anna is getting most of the sales from California. And unsurprisingly, Los Angeles and San Francisco are the two cities where Anna is getting the most sales from. So this is how you can use this drill down and drill up options. And you can keep putting stuff in the y-axis. And the more you put in, the deeper, the more granular your analysis can become. So Moru, is this what you were looking for?
Yeah. And lastly, can we go into the transact, like say, for example, that line level, the table?
Line level, we probably can. If I put order ready here, let's see if what this gives us. So it'll give you each order by order if that is what you were looking for. So every single order that was placed, all of those are displayed here.
Okay.
If you're looking for a tabular format, then that is not possible because this will only show you everything in a bar chart format.
Okay. Okay. Got it. Got it. Yeah.
All right, so let me go back up. All right, guys. So, any questions? I think that's pretty much the end of today's class. We've covered quite a lot. But if you have any questions, anything you want me to repeat right now, please let me know. So what I will do from my side is I'll share the links that I've mentioned. I'll share this report, and I'll also find a couple of other links I wanted to share. I'll put all of that in the email that the team will share with you guys today.
Yeah. That will be appreciated. Yeah.
Perfect. So, guys, any questions? Anything you want me to repeat? Alrighty. Okay, so next week we'll start off with DAX. Just probably the most important part of learning Power BI as an analyst. So we'll start off with DAX next week, and we'll primarily focus on the basic DAX functions and all those different things, understand, calculate columns and measures and all of that. But just this week, if you guys can practice that on that Contoso model, the data modeling part, and just view a couple of videos on best practices of data modeling, that will help you far more than creating visuals will in the long run. All right. So, all right, guys. So I'll stop here. I'll stop the recording and I'll see you guys next week.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good evening.
you.
Thanks.